Nothing worse than going out buying your next new car and finding all of a sudden 2 years later you have engine problems, or even worse, some of the electrical problems means your car is constantly in the shop for repairs and servicing. And on top of that, you definitely don't want a vehicle that looks great today, but in 2 years it looks out of date and nobody even loves it, or they even laugh at you driving that thing down the road. So I'm going to share a list of 10 of these junky vehicles you'll hate buying because you didn't do the research. Let's get into it now. Life's too short to drive boring cars. The first vehicle on our list that people often go, oh, 2 years into ownership is this little unit right here. Why? And I've spoken about this before, where it's a fun little driving experience, but quite often it lets people down in short order. The first early generation of this car here is one in which people often just want to get rid of it as soon as they possibly can. The worst part is they often find themselves underwater. It depreciates like a rock thrown into the lake. Unfortunately, this beautiful little CLA wrapped in this blue skin right behind us here is a vehicle that often a lot of people love, and I personally think they're styled very, very well. It's not so much this model here, which is a CLA 45. It's the one that's much more popular that a lot of people are buying. It's one that's more attainable, more affordable, and quite frankly has all of the same design themes that this model has, but it just has the 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. Other than the fact that it depreciates like it's going out of style, you can see situations like this where you have oil dripping out from underneath this vehicle. They're also known for coolant leaks, and water pumps are a specific issue in a lot of these vehicles, where allegedly this brand here would cop up and say that isn't an actual problem, but a lot of customers are finding that it should make a recall list. And the reality is we're talking water pumps that fail prematurely. You wind up with coolant on the ground, cooling pipe system issues, leaks, broken fittings, and the worst part is it's going to cost you dollars out of the pocket. And people start realizing that after you're outside of warranty about 2 or 3 years in, and that's when things really get ugly. There's also some strange noises. This car here has a double clutch gearbox, and that of course is a little bit rougher than most people are accustomed to. And a lot of people thinking they're buying the 3-pointed star here and they're going to get that beautiful modern day Mercedes-Benz and pamper you in the lap of luxury, think again. This car has also been noted to have a very rough, rigid, and aggressive ride that a lot of people really didn't sign up for, and it's not until you own it for a short while that you quickly realize it's jarring and it's a little rough and aggressive and certainly unrefined. And while these vehicles look great on initial purchase, there are some shortcomings. Obviously, the wheels are very, very small in a lot of these vehicles. They don't have the big, beautiful taillights you're finding in some of the later models, and a lot of the sunroofs they're finding when you operate the sunroof that it's getting a grinding and a squeaking noise, and there have been sunroofs that have come off the rails. So what about the inside of these cars? Well, the interior isn't necessarily living up to the Mercedes dream either. And again, after you spend some time behind the wheel, you quickly realize what a disappointment. Another disappointment that sends people packing and getting rid of these things in short order and highly regretting them is the fact that once you start digging deeper, you realize that 4-cylinder engine that's tucked under there is actually built by a French manufacturer. That's right, it's not even built and derived by Mercedes. So sadly, the Mercedes CLA in the first generation lacks a lot of luster, lacks a lot of durability and reliability, and certainly doesn't live up to the name in terms of overall luxury amenities. And as a result, people quickly figure out this car was a huge mistake and send it down the road. So a lot of these picks that people are hating after a short time comes from you viewers. You guys are leaving comments down in the comment section below, and I've summarized and pulled together a lot of different great comments of your choices of vehicles you wish you would never even touched. So here goes number 2, the next vehicle in line of vehicles that a lot of people regret. Now, I personally know people that have bought these and they like them because they're practical. You can throw all kinds of junk in there. You can throw lumber in there, kids can hop in and out, you can eat your French fries at McDonald's and make a mess of it, not really worry too much of it. But they don't come without some issues, and a lot of people end up just regretting these. Number 1, we get clunking front end noise. There's not uncommon to see noise and clunk, 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 bang, get front end loose here. The transmission on these as well, torque converters can break, and there's problems with some of that. As well, rear main seal on these engines, or the rear seal, crankshaft seal, has been known to leak dramatically. Transmission issues, jerking, bucking, and actually and then whoa! And honestly, the transmission isn't necessarily a strong point, and it never has been for these Dodge Caravans or Plymouth Voyagers from back in the day. Now, the latest generations are getting better. Allegedly, there's far fewer problems in the newer vehicles, but let's take a look inside as well. The interior is highly regrettable, feels like sitting in a fish bowl, and quite frankly, the plastics are enough to choke out a horse. There's also people that comment about coolant leaks, the fact that some of the V6 engines sitting sideways are very difficult to maintain as well, and some of the maintenance and access are very poor in these vehicles, and a very simplistic set of taillights, and honestly, the vehicle is nothing much more than a milk carton on wheels, and that's where people get to. They don't look at this and say, oh yeah, I need to have that. After a while, it wears off very quickly and then they move on. And honestly, people get very bored of it. The problem is they depreciate like they're going out of style. And so it's one of those vehicles you end up just holding on to because there's no point in trying to get rid of it. It's not worth much to punt on the used car market. And naturally, because it's a late model Dodge Chrysler product and Stellantis, and they use what they call a TIPM, totally integrated power module, it actually affects parts like lights, mirrors, gauges, your fuel pump, and it does potentially cause the vehicle to stall or not start at all. Because that's all your integrated power module. It has all your inputs, outputs, all your electrics go through this module, and those modules have a high probability of failure rate. They're quite expensive to fix, and quite honestly, Jeep, Dodge, a lot of these products tend to have this issue. Most people I've spoke to end up driving these things, just drive them till the wheels fall off because they're definitely not worth selling on the used car market. And there's another unit that's highly regrettable, and not too many people want to keep these for a very long time. That's why you're seeing a lot of late model units like this on the car lots. It's just not a very fresh vehicle. It's quite outdated. The fuel economy is abysmal. It has driver's seats that you can't raise, so it's quite brutally uncomfortable to use for long hauls. Just the style and the quality isn't there. It has loud road noise. It definitely doesn't feel very refined. And honestly, it is literally a price point Jeep as you would actually expect. What do you think you're gonna get if you're buying the bottom of the barrel? I mean, here, as we can see, we have the Jeep and they have this closed off grille. And yeah, they do have alloy wheels. And of course, this is the Compass that we're talking about here. The interior is quite basic and nothing to write home about there. Sure, while they have these two-tone double-stitched bolsters on the seats, they look fresh there, but the rest of the interior has so much plastic, it feels like a fisherman's tackle box inside. We also can't forget, because it is a Jeep product, as we see right here, we have the TIPM issue, the totally integrated power module, which can impact the lights, the way they operate, tailgate, windows, of course here, power mirrors, and the fact that it may actually stall inadvertently because the totally integrated power module controls most of your input and output electrical features in these vehicles. Quite frankly, a few people that I've known actually have reached out to me and said they bought one, and regrettably, they wish they'd made a little longer choice, done a little more research, and instead bought vehicles like Toyota RAV4, like we're looking at here. Much more reliable. You're going to get 300,000–400,000 miles out of it if you maintain it. It's quieter. It has less power, but it is easily a vehicle that you can live with forever and 3 days. And here's another vehicle that a lot of people regret, and they've reached out to me, told me so. As a matter of fact, some of them have even used the description of they'd rather have a root canal in every tooth of their mouth than have to go through the process of buying one of these again. This is a Nissan, as you notice right here, and specifically Pathfinder, which is kind of ironic because it's more like a couch finder. And it's not clearly made for off-roading. It's turned more into a big soft minivan. And so for people thinking that they're getting into a big beefy off-road machine, this is not it. This is more like a city dweller. There are some problems. One being a fuel sender. There's talk about sometimes you get a check engine light or a fuel sender issue because the distortion in the fuel tank has caused an inaccurate reading up front. And of course, that has been a big problem for some of these vehicles. Another big one is the transmission in these vehicles. Huge, huge issue. One of the most significant problems you're going to find in one of these Nissan Pathfinders is the automatic transmission. Jerks, judders, stalls, and catastrophically fails. But a lot of times what actually ends up happening is cooling system actually imposes itself into the transmission. That's right. You can almost anticipate a $3,000 to $4,000 expense because you wind up with coolant in the transmission and then the whole thing goes boom! And then you have yourself a big repair. So you could have coolant leaks, transmission failures, and the like. As well, on the front of these vehicles, something to be aware of: when you cold start the vehicle, you might hear a kind of the sound of a rattling chain. Well, often there's a lot of these vehicles that do seem to sustain timing chain issues. And timing chain obviously coordinates the pistons and the valves. And if that doesn't coordinate properly, the engine either A, doesn't run, kicks out of sync, or just goes boom, another catastrophic failure for Nissan. So there have been some electric issues and other drivability problems, but the big thing is here it's a big soft couch with reliability challenges, and Nissan hasn't necessarily figured that out in its entirety. Let's take a look inside as well. And you look at the dash, it looks very extensive in plastic. Lots of plastic in the armrest and the console. Quite frankly, it feels quite cheap on the inside as well. And so Nissan clearly missed the mark when they were dealing with the Toyota 4Runner, definitely continued down that path of building vehicles that were meant for a little more off-road capability, and the reliability that Toyota has experienced is just one in which they believe don't change what's not broken. And unfortunately, Nissan's gone and changed way too much, which is ironic here. They go and put a hitch here for a trailer, which clearly is a really irresponsible move considering the transmission is a big part of that, and you're likely to experience further and an easier, quicker transmission failure when you're trying to tow something with that Pathfinder. Another vehicle that people go tow and wish they never bought it, they're hating on it after a couple of short years, some of which is the reliability, some of which is the style, and it's this little vehicle right here. So what exactly are we talking about here? Well, this is a Nissan. They call this a subcompact SUV, and clearly it has these nasty looking front ends. So at first it seemed like a good idea at the time, but after a year or two of driving this, they thought, wow, this thing is a literal eyesore with these weird looking headlights. And then they go and put another set of headlights, and it feels like they're doubling down on what is otherwise a really bad design cosmetically. The Nissan joke is that car in the subcompact territory that right out of the box is considered relatively reliable, at least in the later models. The earlier versions from 2011 to 14 have a lot of problems, but some of these vehicles are still about $100 more per year for servicing than your average subcompact SUV, which means they're a little bit pricier and certainly not worth the trouble, especially when you're driving around in something that looks like this. But there are some big time issues with these. For example, gearboxes, transmissions have been known to fail, lurchy, jerky, and catastrophically fail from time to time. Coolant leaks, fuel pressure regulator. Some of these fuel leaks could potentially lead to a fire, which obviously is a bad situation. Another problem here are transmission failures, as I mentioned, outright, engine failures as a result of timing chains. Well, as again, we've spoken about a lot of the products that you're getting from Nissan have timing chain issues. So you start out with a little bit of a snake rattle under the hood, and next thing you know, boom, this thing blows up because pistons and valves make connection, and it's all over but the crying. So there's not too many people that I've come across that openly admit they drive one of these Nissan jokes, and when they do, they're certainly not bragging about it, and honestly, they're hating the fact that they went and spent their hard-earned dollars on one of these little subcompact SUVs. And there's the next unit that's highly regretted. A lot of people are hating these after a year or two of ownership, and there's a lot of reasons why that is. Let's take a quick look around first of all, and I'll explain some of the problems, obviously, other than the styling, which is absolutely horrific. I mean, look at that boxy front end, and I realize the style was something that customers were asking for, and it did go through a trend, but trend is gone and ship has sailed, and this vehicle is just fugly. Clearly not a lot to love with these vehicles, but let's talk about some of the major issues. Number one is tire wear. For some reason, for such a small, lightweight vehicle, it gobbled through tires like there was no tomorrow. We have to talk about underneath. There was coolant leaks, oil leaks with some of these vehicles as well. Then inside the electronic column, there's an electronic lock that would hang up and create problems there as well. Some drivability issues, a little rough, shaky rides, and it definitely lacked any polish or refinement. But look at this back corner. Here you have to ask yourself, why did this corner look glass around here, but on this corner they ended off with body panel? That's, I guess, for shoulder checking. It's a little bit of an odd thing. But another issue was headrests were awkward in a wrong spot, and the vehicle was just enormously uncomfortable. But a big issue was the CVT, the continuously variable transmission. People just got done with this. And this is at a time when Nissan was struggling with some of their vehicles and their CVT transmissions failing. These were no different. $3,000 or more to get one retrofitted, and usually it kind of started to slink and slur and drive weird for the first year, and shortly within a years after that, then it catastrophically went bang, and that was it for the CVT transmission. So that clearly was a styling issue as well as quality control with this vehicle. And even though it's relatively simple to maintain, if a steering wheel or a gear shifter could break, they could probably break in this vehicle because it wasn't all that well made and it was really awkward. People just regretted buying it. So much, in fact, that Canada and the United States basically pulled out, retracted, and sales took a nosedive. So by the mid-2015 or thereabouts, the deal was done and the Nissan Cube was gone. Here's another one that I've spoken to a few people I know that actually went out and bought these. Some emailed me and actually told me what the response was of this particular vehicle. Obviously, it has some interesting taillights. This is a Jeep, and that's why people buy them. They think they get the Jeep durability and the off-roading prowess with this vehicle, but they're sorely wrong. Yeah, you get these great little hooks on the bottom, and this is a trail hawk. Oh no, it's a hawk. Look, square back end. Of course, simple little handles on these vehicles too. This is a Renegade. And I'll be totally honest with you, this is a Renegade, but Renegade in the way of a rebel rouser. It decides it wants to do nothing to do with reliability because these vehicles are a problem. They have that Tiger Shark 4-cylinder engine that's heavy on oil, heavy on gas, so it pumps out all kinds of emissions. It's an oil burner. It's not a great one for reliability. We know the transmissions are problems in these as well because they jerk and they lurch. And while there may be some fix for that with a tune, these vehicles aren't great. Yes, you can get them with a manual gearbox, that's the way I'd go, but that's the only way that they're actually somewhat livable. Tip them? You betcha. The lights, the mirrors, the windows, and everything gauges inside, and actually you can have stalling issues, running, not starting, and all kinds of problems because the fuel pump could be impacted by that tip 'em as well. Talking a significant amount of money to replace that as well, but more importantly is the inconvenience and the quality control that you get with these vehicles. The Jeep Renegade is definitely one that you don't want anything to do with, and clearly not too many people do because the general feedback I got is they're definitely not one that they want to hold on to. And right here is the next vehicle that definitely is going to be on the regret list. Now, there are some great BMWs to drive, don't get me wrong, and even the X5 that we're looking at here is great in certain engine configurations. But the configuration that you're seeing right here is the one in which I wouldn't suggest buying, and I know I've heard from friends of mine who actually regret it, and I've also heard from viewers they have had struggles with this vehicle and they would never do it again. Well, what's the problem with this? Clearly, it's a good-looking SUV, and BMW makes some of the best handling SUVs, and some of their cars certainly. They definitely bring the driving experience. But what is going on here? Well, let's take a look and I'll explain. Because after owning one of these for a period of time, people just get downright sick of it. Some of these vehicles have a self-leveling. As you can see, this one here looks like it's lower than it is over there. Look at the front suspension. There's more space there than there is here. That means these rear air ride suspensions in many cases start to fail. That becomes problematic, and you're talking about every 3 or 4 years you're having to do airbags. Of course, you do have carbon fouling. These exhaust tips there often foul up right there. You'll see the black carbon in there. Again, as I say, X5, they're great. A lot of automation in these vehicles, a lot of technology, but it's specifically this engine that I have to advise away from, and it's anything with the designation 50i, in this case by BMW. Because the 50i there denotes that it's got the 4.4 liter twin turbo V8 engine. Yes, it packs a lot of punch, great performance, but there's a catch. Timing chains have been an issue with some of these. They also have the hot V. So they package the turbos in there, lots of plastics, and that hot V means the turbos are in there nice and tight and snug. Means they start to cook. Wiring, plastic, gaskets, oil leaks, coolant leaks, and of course those turbos start to cook away at the top end of the engine. Yes, valve guide seals are made of a harder plasticky type substance and they melt down. You wind up basically consuming a large amount of oil. And for earlier generations of that twin turbo V8, that 4.4 called the N63, there's been a lot of customers had a problem. They had basically BMW Care take care of this, monitor fuel consumption, monitor minimal repairs and replacements. But at the end of the day, a lot of people had a lot of troubles with that V8 engine. Yeah, great performance. And yes, the upgrades and the latest and greatest is getting better, but the earlier generations of that V8 engine have been a big problem. Timing chains, as I say, is a big one because if that fails, you wind up with piston and valve collision, and that's an engine, it's gone. Water pumps, cooling lines, lots of complex technology buried under the hood. And again, as I keep adding, great performance. But the best engine to get in this vehicle is the inline 6 called the B58. That's a turbo 6, 3 liter, much more durable, more maintainable, and far less problematic. So this one here, definitely I've had a lot of people reply, they hate it because it's costing them an arm and 4.5 legs. And here's another one that people definitely regret, and I've had so many comments and people reach out to tell me that they hate this vehicle now. They hate it with a passion because it has caused them nothing but heartburn, heartache. And while certain engines in these BMWs like we're looking at here can be solid and can be okay, the ones that we're finding in this body style here, not particularly good. Let's take a quick look. If you're looking at BMWs 3 Series, for example, or 5 Series that carry diesel 4-cylinder engines or the gas 4-cylinder engines, and they're both turbocharged, and these vehicles are from back a generation about 10 years ago, then you can appreciate that some of the issues. The N20 is the turbo 4-cylinder engine. You have valve cover gasket leaks, oil filter housing leaks, coolant leaks galore as well. We can't forget about the infamous timing chain problem, which is well known, particularly in the earlier generations. And if that happened, you basically throw that car away. It's not worth anything after that. As well as the N47 engine, we're talking turbo diesel 4-cylinder, same generation, also had timing chain issues. You also couldn't prematurely do them because the timing chain was up against the firewall and it left you in a world of hurt, having to spend thousands of dollars at the shop to get that vehicle rectified. Coolant leaks, oil leaks, lots of problems. Now, while BMW isn't huge on electrical issues and a lot of their body structures held up very, very well, those 2 generational engines from about 10 years ago are huge problems for their gas and diesel 4-cylinder engines. Definitely stay away. Those are vehicles that I have a lot of people reach out and say they hate them with a passion. And here's the next vehicle that people are definitely, we're starting to hear a lot more people starting to regret these. It's a Ford pickup truck, yes. But we know Ford F-150, the best-selling pickup trucks in North America, but this one's special. There's something about it that makes customers definitely want to get rid of it sooner than later. Have you heard of the story where Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford, decided to take it for a road trip and realized the range just wasn't there? That's right, we're looking at an electric vehicle by Ford. This is their first full-size electric truck. Definitely trying to go toe-to-toe with Tesla's Cybertruck, but the range just isn't there yet. There's lots of problems with these vehicles, and they're hearing lots of stories all over the press of customers just getting rid of them. It's not satisfying their needs. And while Ford puts this vehicle, obviously you get the full-size pickup chassis, and that's what drew the customers into it in the first place. It definitely resembled everything by Ford until it was time to actually use it. And obviously you can tell by these great little details that gives it away. This is the Lightning here, and clearly you don't have a real grille, but you do have a place to plug in right there. And this full-size truck is one of those vehicles that a lot of people want to get their hands on until they did, and then it was time to get rid of it. Range anxiety was huge, and these Ford Lightnings grossly let people down. And with all of that said, be sure to check out that 2024's best vehicles that you can possibly get this year. You're definitely going to want to check it out if you're out shopping for the next new vehicle. Hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. We'll see you all real soon. Bye-bye.